My fellow realtors, as your 2022 past president, I am delighted to have you join us as the gavel is passed to a new leader of our association. Not only are we officially swearing in our new president, joining the proceedings will be our 2022 Executive Committee, as well as our Canopy Realtor Association, Canopy MLS, and Canopy Housing Foundation boards of directors. A year ago, outgoing President John Kimbom stood before us in the role I occupy here today and asked, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Simple and yet so powerful. Being one another's neighbor is a blessing, a reward, a challenge, and an inconvenience all rolled into one. The concept of being a neighbor is summed up in John Donne's 400-year-old poem against isolationism. The gospel commands us to love our neighbor and even sacrifice to serve our neighbor, and that is what comes to my mind as I see my fellow realtors take an oath to serve the best interests of our association, or dare I say, our neighbors. In my years of service to this association, and especially in the past 12 months as your president, I considered all the Canopy Realtor Association members and MLS subscribers to have been my neighbor. Inclusion was another buzzword Kimbom left me with, and I know not everyone felt included all the time. When membership applications were delayed, I know some of you may have not felt included. The growth of our MLS, which grew by 28% overnight, impacted the onboarding process tremendously. Still today, because of your patience and our great staff in member services, Ramco, which had been delayed by the pandemic, has vastly streamlined the process and onboarding of new members faster than ever before. When our MLS Board of Directors steered us to single lockbox system, and some of us changed lockboxes from Century to Supra, there were a few among us that may not have felt included. But now, Canopy MLS operates under one lockbox system, connecting more agents to more listings than ever before. In the midst of racial tension brought about by the death of George Floyd and others, some of our neighbors may not have felt included, but in April, we called upon every member and subscriber to stand up for racial equity, and through the leadership of the Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, Canopy facilitated a summit of industry partners with local and national leaders from the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, the Asian Real Estate Association of America, and the LGBTQ+ Real Estate Alliance, proving that when representatives from diverse perspectives are at the same leadership table, we are all better and more likely to succeed in meeting housing needs. A community where all housing needs are met is the core belief of the Canopy Housing Foundation, and sometimes the least of us may not feel included. But in 2021, our foundation completely rescheduled its normal order of operations to minimize the effects of COVID on the return of our fundraising and programming efforts so that critical housing needs were not only met, but paced by a record-breaking fundraising year. Some of you who are relatively new to the neighborhood may not feel included as distance hinders connectivity. However, when our community was hit the hardest, the Canopy Realtor Association and Canopy MLS stepped up on August 26th to contribute $400,000 to our neighbors, our fellow Canopy Realtor Association members in Haywood County, to provide relief from the effects of Tropical Storm Fred. The COVID pandemic, for many, may have limited the connections neighbors normally enjoy due to limitations on gatherings. But within the cloud of the pandemic, the Canopy Real Estate Institute found a silver lining, with Realtor Hot Topics receiving record-breaking audiences as realtors by the hundreds tuned in virtually for timely topics and industry-specific updates. The demand for more information on these hot topics in our industry led Canopy to launch a podcast entitled Inside the Canopy Files in order to continue that conversation. The podcast helped launch a media investment into not only our current real estate market, but also our past. You see, 2021 marked the 100th anniversary of the Canopy Realtor Association. Legendary past leaders were called upon to make yet another valuable contribution to their association by recording on video their role in our history, so we understand better who we are and from where we began, all to be documented on our Canopy100.com microsite. Now, as we embark upon a new century for our association, we are poised for new heights under the leadership of Lee Allen, whose wisdom, experience, energy and enthusiasm was instrumental in the direction of our association during my presidency, and as luck would have it, my family and I count Lee and Mary Burt to be dear friends and wonderful human beings. I say this to assure you that the association gavel passes into capable hands. In closing, I am reminded that many years ago in Europe, they built train tracks over the Alps between Vienna and Venice before there was a train that could even make the trip. They built it anyway because they knew one day a train would come. And my hope and intent as your president was to do the same, to build tracks for future leaders to come and serve our association, our neighbors. You see, it was the only way I could repay those who laid the tracks for me. People like Walker, Fisher, Cottingham, Helms, Kuzar, Browning, Lawing, Barnhart, Smith, Larsh, Rash, Dillashaw, Munson, Anderson, Knutson, Frontera, Remsen, Marin, Parham, Lindsay, Gentry, Hayden, and Kimbaum. If one day there are plaudits upon something Canopy did when I was among its leaders, I will think of these history makers as well as those I served with and remember their love and service to their association and to their neighbors. And I encourage you all who are watching to craft your own contribution to the glorious unfolding of our Canopy Realtor Association. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Andy Jung, who is the Director of Church Engagement at the Fuller Youth Institute, to administer the oath of office for President.
It is my honor to welcome Lee Allen, my friend and colleague, to please join me in being installed as the 2022 Canopy President. Lee, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly and sincerely promise and affirm that you will administer the office of President to which you have been elected to the best of your ability and judgment, and in conformity with the Constitution and bylaws of the Canopy Realtor Association and Canopy MLS, that you will observe and abide by the laws of North Carolina and South Carolina and the Realtor Code of Ethics, that you will uphold and support North Carolina Association of Realtors, the South Carolina Association of Realtors, and the National Association of Realtors, that you will in all your acts be governed by the principles of honesty, justice, and fair play, and in every manner possible strive to promote and safeguard the best interests of private property rights owners across the Carolinas, the high purpose of Canopy Realtor Association and/or Canopy MLS, and the welfare of its membership. Do you so subscribe?
I do.
You may lower your hand. By virtue of the authority conferred upon me, I do hereby proclaim you to be duly and officially installed as the 2022 President of the Canopy Realtor Association and Canopy MLS. It's now my pleasure to present you with the official presidential pin that will be placed on you by your wife, Mary Burt. Please join me in congratulating Lee.
Thank you, Andy, for being here on this special occasion. Your installing me as president is tremendously meaningful to me and the future of Canopy. Having watched you lead multi-generational organizations and teams has been a real inspiration and has set a standard for which I hope to aspire. Before I install our board of directors for Canopy Realtor Association and Canopy MLS, I would like to present the glass gavel to David Kennedy in honor and recognition of his service and commitment to our association. David, you were the right leader at the right time. You accomplished so much, many firsts for our association, while laying the groundwork for important initiatives that will continue well into the future. And you did all of this while still helping our association navigate through the lingering challenges of the pandemic with perseverance and determination. You also created a legacy of leadership with all you did to capture and celebrate our centennial. Please accept this glass gavel as a symbol of our admiration and appreciation.
Thank you, Lee. I believe I hear Barbara Streisand singing, "Have I Stayed Too Long at the Fair?" Thank you very much.
Please join me in watching the officers and board of directors for Canopy Realtor Association and then Canopy MLS take their oath of office. It has been said that any definition of a successful life must include serving others. And as you assume your new leadership roles in this prominent organization, you become the leading example of those individuals who embody this ideal. You join the ranks of those who saw a need and acted to fill it. And you are now identified as officers and directors of Canopy Realtor Association and Canopy MLS. Therefore, a greater responsibility rests upon you, and you must conduct yourselves accordingly. Furthermore, you must dedicate yourselves to work for the best interest of private property rights on behalf of those who aspire to own a piece of the American dream, as well as the welfare of the membership of the Canopy Realtor Association, Canopy MLS, our community, the states in which we do business, and our nation. You are now in a position to exert influence upon important matters affecting real estate, and therefore you must endeavor to elevate the standards and practice of the real estate business in your community, throughout the states of North and South Carolina, and the professional conduct of the persons engaged therein. And your efforts will not go unrewarded. As the newly elected or appointed officers and directors of the Canopy Realtor Association and Canopy MLS, you are entering into a new adventure in friendship. Friendship that only comes through service, cooperation, and your unselfish interest on behalf of others. The secret of living is the art of giving, and so to each of you, this year comes with the privilege of giving and learning that the most sought-after element of success and lasting happiness comes through giving, with the investment of your time, your energy, and your unselfish interest in the lives of others. I now ask Canopy Realtor Association officers and directors to raise their right hand. Do you solemnly and sincerely promise and affirm that you will administer the office to which you have been elected or appointed to the best of your ability and judgment, and in conformity with the bylaws of the Canopy Realtor Association, that you will observe and abide by the laws of North Carolina and South Carolina and the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, that you will uphold and support the North Carolina Association of Realtors, the South Carolina Association of Realtors, and the National Association of Realtors, that you will in all of your acts be governed by the principles of honesty, justice, and fair play, and in every manner possible strive to promote and safeguard the best interest of private property rights owners across the Carolinas, the high purposes of the Canopy Realtor Association, and the welfare of the membership of both. Do you so subscribe? You may lower your hand. And by virtue of the authority conferred upon me, I do hereby proclaim you to be duly and officially installed as the 2022 officers and directors of Canopy Realtor Association. Congratulations. Please join me in watching the officers and board of directors for Canopy MLS take their oath of office. I now ask the Canopy MLS officers and directors to raise their right hand. Do you solemnly and sincerely promise and affirm that you will administer the office to which you have been elected or appointed to the best of your ability and judgment, and in the conformity with the bylaws of Canopy MLS, that you will observe and abide by the laws of North Carolina and South Carolina and the National Association Realtor Code of Ethics, that you will uphold and support the North Carolina Association of Realtors, the South Carolina Association of Realtors, and the National Association of Realtors, that you will in all of your acts be governed by the principles of honesty, justice, and fair play, and in every manner possible strive to promote and safeguard the best interest of private property rights owners across the Carolinas, the high purposes of the Canopy MLS, and the welfare of subscribers. Do you so subscribe? You may lower your hand, and by virtue of the authority conferred upon me, I do hereby proclaim you to be duly and officially installed as the 2022 officers and directors of Canopy MLS. Congratulations. On January 13th, 2022, the Board of Directors for Canopy Housing Foundation took their oath of office at their virtual board meeting. I would like to read the oath taken by our foundation board. Margaret Mead is well known for saying, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, concerned citizens can change the world. And indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." As you assume your leadership roles within the Canopy Housing Foundation, you are demonstrating your commitment to challenge groups, both large and small, to change the world. And in doing so, you strive to create a community where all housing needs are met. And today, as you stand before us, you are identified as officers and directors of the Canopy Housing Foundation, the recognized charitable arm of the Canopy Realtor Association. You have been asked to take on a great deal of responsibility, to maintain the sanctity of our charitable works, to always conduct yourselves professionally, to work for the best interest of the community, including those who are homeless and those who are seeking a home. You also represent those who bear the title of Realtor, an honor and responsibility accepted by those who believe that everyone deserves a safe place to call home. Do you solemnly and sincerely promise that you will administer the office to which you have been appointed to the best of your ability and judgment, and in conformity with the bylaws of Canopy Housing Foundation? Do you certify that you will observe and abide by the laws of North Carolina and South Carolina? That you will, in all of your acts, be governed by the principles of honesty, charity, justice, and fair play, and act accordingly to protect the legally conferred nonprofit status of the Canopy Housing Foundation? By virtue of the authority conferred upon me, I do hereby proclaim you to be duly and officially installed as the 2022 officers and directors of Canopy Housing Foundation. We congratulate them and thank them for their service. Thank you for watching today. I would like to make a few brief remarks before inviting my friend and colleague Dr. Andy Zhang to join me in having a conversation on the importance of engagement, relationships, and developing networks. And I would like to start off my remarks with a few acknowledgments of expressions of gratitude. First, thank you to our past presidents. Having had the pleasure to serve under many of you, I've had the privilege of learning from the best. Your leadership, through good times, through adversity and challenges, has been inspirational. Secondly, my family, both present and those who have passed on, because the skills, the tenacity, and ethics have taught me that service is a high calling. My children, Meredith and Jackson, who inspire me to be the best I can be, and most importantly, my wife, Mary Burt, who now in our 31st year of marriage has always been there for me, and I'm a better man because of you. Thank you. Canopy's just finished celebrating our last 100 years. So now, as we enter into our second century, how do we ensure our next 100 years is better? How do we learn from our past and take those lessons, sometimes very painful reminders of where we did not live up to our best selves, and make our communities better because of our service to our communities? And it starts with each of us. Each one of us, combined with our diverse membership, makes the collective better. But why? Why do you do what you do, and why do you serve? Why should we serve? Is it for ego, for the status, for the recognition? Because service, I've learned, is a higher calling. And simply, it's putting others first. Recently, Canopy's boards and leaders spent a day where we took a hard look across our diverse leaders, asking a simple question: why? Why do we exist? What's our purpose? And why should anyone care? Spending that day with leaders brought clarity, and in that clarity distilled out a simple answer. We exist to improve our communities, period. We help folks find a home. And when folks find a home, they find security. Home is where homework is done. It's where businesses are born and families are made. And realtors are there to help make that transaction happen, to help buyers and sellers navigate that oftentimes challenging process. And many of our members think of us as a glorified database of all the properties available for sale, but Canopy is much more than that. Through our association, our MLS, and our Real Estate Institute, we strive to lead, educate, and equip our members. Through Canopy Housing Foundation, we demonstrate the heart and soul of our association by being the hands and feet, giving, serving, and working to address unmet housing needs and advocating for fair and affordable housing standards and practices, coming alongside those doing amazing work in our communities. So, if we exist to make our communities better, then how do we go about that? Well, first, it takes all of us. Coming together for the common good of all, using our God-given strengths together, collectively, to achieve what each of us individually could not. And it starts with trust. Trust that we each are seeking the betterment of our communities, not for ego and self-gratification, but realizing that when one succeeds, we all succeed. A team is not a group of individuals who work together, but rather a team is a group of people who trust each other. It takes inclusivity, seeking diverse opinions and views to broaden our perspectives, realizing we can't do it alone. And it takes humility, realizing that as individuals, we don't know it all. We make our communities better through communication. George Bernard Shaw said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. So, over-communicate. Tell the good news and work that we are doing to our members in our communities, highlighting the great work that realtors do each and every day in our communities. We make our communities better through advocation. It's been said that working hard for something we don't care about is stress. We're working hard for something we care about. It's called passion. And we advocate because we care. So how do we work every day to make our communities better? We learn every day, asking questions, remaining curious, striving to learn and broaden our perspective every day. Being in the top of our profession, as our friends at the National Association of Hispanic Professionals say in their NARP 10, being good enough is not good enough. And that takes each of us holding each other accountable. Basketball Hall of Famer Joe Dumars is quoted as saying, on good teams, coaches hold players accountable, and on great teams, players hold players accountable. And finally, making our communities great takes each one of us remaining grateful. Grateful for the challenges as well as the successes. And I don't know about you, but I enjoy the successes. But my greatest learning has come as a result of the challenges and obstacles I've had to overcome and work through. And we will have challenges this year. We will not always have all of the clarity we want to make a decision, but we will make a decision, demonstrating what Thomas Edison's statement in that I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And so, I'm grateful for all of you, for your support, your encouragement, and your service to our respective communities. Because of you, we are all better, and Canopy stands here ready to serve by leading, educating, and equipping. So please, plug in. I know what it's like to wake up every day unemployed and to have that one deal you just knew was going to close fall apart due to no fault of yours. But keep going. Take nothing for granted, but be grateful for every opportunity to serve, to improve the lives of our neighbors, our friends, and our colleagues, and to put others first. To come together realizing that none of us are as smart as all of us. And let's talk with others and not about others. Many of you know I love to run, and it's a time and place where I watch sunrises, I tell stories with fellow runners, and sometimes I just go and think while logging the miles. Many times it can be a solitude sport, and it's a sport where the only metric is how far and how long did it take. And my running began way back in high school in Randleman, North Carolina. My first experience as a Husky high school runner was the cross-country team. And cross-country is a running sport where the focus on the team becomes very visible. Scoring in cross-country takes into account the top 5 runners of the team and where they finish in regard to the overall finish. Sure, you can have a superstar that comes across first, but Runners 2 through 5 still need to finish in a strong position, otherwise the team will not win. And cross-country season starts in the early season. It's typically hot June, July, and August with those long runs building the base. And then the season goes into late October, where the weather can be pretty unpredictable. And I remember those long runs in the cold, wet October rains. And those workouts with the sweat and stress become the bond that makes individual runners into teams, each holding each other accountable for the work put in. You know, success can be measured on race day, but that's not really where success was achieved. The race is won during the workouts. Race day is simply a demonstration of the work that the team has put in, and runners 3, 4, and 5 are just as critical as runner 1 and 2. So, like cross country, we are each accountable to each other to make the team, Canopy, successful. And it starts with us to make the decision to serve well. There is a poem attributed to an unknown monk that's always resonated with me, and I'd like to share it with you. And it says, "When I was a young man, I wanted to change the world. And I found it was difficult to change the world, so I tried to change my nation. When I found I couldn't change the nation, well, I then began to focus on my town, and I found I couldn't change the town, and as an older man, I then tried to change my family. Well, now, as an old man, I realize the only thing I can change is myself. And suddenly I realized that if long ago I had changed myself, I could have made an impact on my family. My family and I could have made an impact on our town, and our town's impact could have changed the nation. And then I indeed could have changed the world. So together, let's go change the world, and it starts with each of us." Thank you. Andy Jung is the Director of Church Engagement at the Fuller Youth Institute, where he oversees the church engagement strategy. He leads cohorts and other training initiatives, develops relationships and networks with church and denominational leaders, and ensures effective systems and processes to execute all these efforts effectively and efficiently. Andy earned a BS in math education from North Carolina State University, a master's in divinity from Campbell University, and a doctorate in divinity from Fuller Theological Seminary in youth, family, and culture. He has served as a youth minister for 20 plus years and a senior pastor for 5 years. In addition, Andy also served as a state executive leader for Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of North Carolina for 2 years. He is passionate about helping churches better love and care for young people so that teenagers and young adults can thrive in their faith. Andy, thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
First question, I'm a Carolina fan. You're a State fan. Yeah. A Duke fan walks in. What's the deal there?
It's the ABC fan, right? Anybody but Carolina for me. So,
okay.
So all right.
Sorry. All right. So we now, you're 2 of 3. Okay, that's all right. That's good. Listen, thanks for being here. I know you lead engagement, an organization that really talks about engaging people, getting people to come alongside. You used a phrase, and I remember it, multi-generational versus intergenerational. Can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, it's really easy to have different generations in the same room, right? From children all the way through senior adults, 3 or 4 different generations. They're all in the same room. That would be a multi-generational place.
Okay.
But there's a difference between a multi-generational and intergenerational community where they have deep relationships across those generations. Just because you're in the same room doesn't mean you have any type of relationship, right? But when you have an intergenerational church especially, it's where all the different generations love and care for one another.
Wow. So you just said something that I thought had some wisdom in it. Just because you're in the same room doesn't necessarily mean you're on the same page. And we see that in real estate, right? Just because you're both on one side or this side of the transaction, or you're serving or doing this or doing it, doesn't mean you have the best interest of the whatever the target is, right? You end up acting as a silo. Am I putting words in there?
No, that's right. That's right. And for so long in churches, we operated in silos. Children over here, youth over here, adults in another place.
Okay.
And the only time that they might meet is when they get back into their cars to go home for a family, right? And what happens there is they become isolated, and the experience that they have is simply with their peers rather than with the whole of the church. And what we've seen through our research at Florida Youth Institute is that it really requires an intergenerational church to develop a lifelong faith. And that's what we're after in church, is a lifelong faith. It's not just a short-term faith, but a faith that will last. And I think that has some translations into real estate.
Yeah, so like what I just heard was it's more, it's not something you do, it's something you are.
Yeah. I mean, because it's obviously all about relationships.
Okay. So that's interesting thing then. As you're trying to bring folks along, you're trying to get, and we're huge on diversity here. We want to really continue to reach out. But as you're trying to bring folks along and try to help them see the other perspective, what are some of those challenges in that?
Well, we all bring our own stuff to any kind of relationship, right? We bring our own baggage. And so we see the world through the lens in which we've experienced it.
Okay.
And empathy really is learning to see things from the other person's perspective, right? Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy drives connection. So if we make an effort to really see a perspective from the other person's shoes, then that really strengthens the relationship. It brings people together. And when it's in church, especially across generations, we have a hard time of seeing it from different generations. Remember, when I was your age, and then the story follows of walking to school uphill both ways in 3 feet of snow, no shoes on, right? All of that. That's rarely does an empathetic statement follow after you hear when I was your age.
Okay.
Right.
So is that the same thing as the "we've always done it this way" thought process?
Yeah, I think so because that's what we know. That's how we've experienced it.
Okay.
And it's really hard to see it from a different perspective. So it takes a lot of intentionality. It takes a lot of work to really do that well.
So you just mentioned the word intentionality. In other words, saying we're going to do this. Is that just a decision you make, or is it a culture? How do you do that?
Well, I think it begins with culture. Okay. And in order to build a culture that is built on relationships, it requires listening. Leadership always begins with listening. And if we truly listen to one another, not just hear one another, but truly listen to one another and to really understand the other person's perspective, that really can, again, bring connection. And diversity is something that we all desire, and we've talked about it in church, and we've talked about it in other places. But that's where empathy and listening really can bring us together, rather than what we're hearing out in culture that is really separating us.
Wow. And I made it in my comments, real estate practitioners wake up unemployed first thing every morning. And you're like, doesn't matter how good the last year was, doesn't matter how good yesterday was, you wake up today going, I gotta get out of the cave, I gotta go kill it, skill it, grill it, I gotta do whatever I gotta do, drag it back home, and hope and pray I keep it together. I see that, and I could see that in houses of worship as well, where you're realizing that we're only as good. The metrics are, how many seats do I have in this, or how many do this? And I think you've mentioned it before. Sometimes is it focusing on the process rather than that necessary outcome? How do you do that?
Yeah, so in church life, we've always measured three things.
Okay.
I refer to them as the three Bs.
Okay.
The butts, the budget, and the buildings.
I like it. I like it. Okay.
Right. But I think there's a different metric that we need to be thinking of now,
Okay.
which is really engagement. And engagement is so much more than just whether people are in the pews or in the building or not.
Okay.
It's really how they are engaging their faith.
Okay.
And how they're growing in that faith rather than are they just showing up. Because in the past, we thought just showing up meant that they were a lifelong follower.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But that wasn't always true.
Sure.
And now what we're seeing is that young people are leaving the churches in droves.
Okay.
Latest statistic was that 1 million young people are leaving the church annually.
Wow.
Annually, right? You extrapolate
That's a
that
lot.
out.
It doesn't take many years to be a real number.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And so if we measured success in that way, then we're failing miserably.
Okay.
But I think if we can measure it in how are we engaging the people in the church, or how are we engaging our clients?
Sure.
And whether that finishes or ends with a closed deal or not, it's about what we do and what we can control around us. Right?
I'm with you. You know, real estate's unusual, as you know. I don't know if you know this or not. The market's nuts.
Yeah,
right? It's a little
heard.
crazy. Inventory is at an all-time low. We have more realtors than we actually have inventory to sell. So these are some of these first that we're running into. And so the challenge is serving well, and realizing that service may take longer, right? It may be that we have to become the source, if you will, of the information. And yet at the same time, we've got more realtors than we've ever had. The participation percentage tends to want to drop when it comes to serving in a community or anything else. How do we help our practitioners be able to look up a little bit? And while we want to focus on the deal, because that's a metric that we can take home and make the mortgage payment and make the car payment and everything else, how do we focus on being sure that we serve well? Because that's the most important thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think it starts with the mission vision of the individual. What am I really about?
Okay.
And also the organization, right? The organization that I work for. What's the mission and vision there? But more than just a pithy mission statement, because those don't really help us a whole lot.
Right.
I mean, every church has a pretty much similar mission vision statement because. In the houses of worship or in Christianity, Jesus gave us that. So it's like you can't really change a whole lot of that.
Okay.
But what we need to focus on is maybe a vivid description of what we refer to as a vision of future hope. What do we hope for 2 years down the line, 3 years out, 5 years down the line, and let's paint a picture on that. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing in real estate, where I know as a practitioner, folks come into the office and sit down, and a lot of times the first question I'm asking is, how much can you afford? How many bedrooms? How many baths?
Yeah.
How much acreage? Do you want a fence? Do you not want a fence? Do you need a 2-car garage? It's all those things we can point to, right? Which reminds me, sounds a little bit in the church vernacular, the BBB thing. It's but I'm hearing maybe that there's a different question I should be asking.
Yeah, maybe the question that we need to be asking is, what do you dream of? What do you hope for in 3 to 5 to 10 years? What do you desire if it's a young family? What do you desire for your children in your next home? And have the client then provide a description of what they hope for. What kind of memories do you want to make?
Sure.
And let that drive kind of what is the next home for you? Not just a house, right? There's a difference.
Oh,
between
for sure.
that. So what's the next home for you that will help you achieve those or help you make those memories that you so desire for your family?
Wow. So, as you know, a lot of our practitioners, they have that conversation, whatever, they find the house. It might have taken 8 bids in this current market, but they got there. They're good, everything's good. They're working towards the end result, which is settlement day. It's the day everybody gets happy, folks get keys, somebody else gets cash. Everybody goes to the deal, but 72 hours before something comes up, this thing falls apart due to no fault. You've worked for free for 30 to 45 days. How do you handle that frustration?
Yeah, it's
Besides being frustrated.
yeah, it's frustrating, right? Again, so if we focus on did we serve them well, right?
Sure.
The measurement of success there isn't the closed deal. Now, I'm not saying that that's not important by any means.
Sure.
However, the measurement of success is did we serve them well? Did I serve my church well? Did we as a church serve our community well? Whether or not that brings in new members into the church, because that's not the end goal.
Right.
The end goal is did I serve the others well?
So, 1999, the MLS books go away, right? And it used to be you'd come in, you'd sit at the office, we go through a book, I tell you to pick out some stuff, you pick a few things, I make a few phone calls, I go pick up keys. It's not the way it works anymore. Customers, clients come to us with all the information on their phone. They already probably know as much as I initially out of the box before I've done my research. I'm sure in houses of worship, that same information's coming to you. They don't even show up in a door until they've already checked you out. What does that look like moving forward? Does service, maybe serving well, does that stand the test of time as technology comes into the thing?
Yeah, for churches, it's going to be that it's the websites, it's the videos, it's their printed material. That has now become the front door of the church. Just because you may not know the people coming into your building on a Sunday morning, but they certainly know you because they haven't. They've studied and they've researched and they've seen you from a distance.
Got it.
Before you even get to set your eyes on them.
I mean, that's very much like real estate where they've already done the research on the agent, the production level, all of that information. They've done everything. So your social media is you.
Yeah.
Right?
And for faith communities, that is an area of growth for many faith communities because it isn't something that has been natural to us. It's something that we've had to learn how to do. And for many, there's some growth that needs to happen in that area.
Wow. So maybe pivoting just a little bit to boards and the way we lead here at Canopy. You talk about, and I really see some similarities here, you talk about bringing organizations along where older groups have different needs than the younger folks. On our boards, we all bring folks in with backgrounds that are completely dissimilar. But we all have a fiduciary to see Canopy succeed. How do you build a consensus or a buy-in or anything else when everybody's bringing different perspectives, but at the end of the day, there's a decision has to be made? How do you do that?
Yeah, and I would kind of go back to, does Canopy have the vivid description of the future hope?
Got it.
What is it that Canopy desires? The subscribers to Canopy at the end of the next you've celebrated just your first century. In the next 10 years, where does Canopy want to be? What picture do you want to paint, and how do we get there?
Yeah, you mentioned something too one time about lending the keys. Yeah. Can you just talk to that for a second? Because the concept's really great.
Yeah, and the concept really is about mentorship, right?
Okay.
oftentimes what happens in churches, what we've seen through our research, is that that young people have to wait until they're a certain age before they're given any kind of real responsibility in the church. And oftentimes that's 40, 50 years of age. And by that time, they may not be around to take on that leadership. And so we call it key chain leadership, is older members who holds maybe even the physical keys and the kind of the virtual keys of the church, of how do we share it with the younger generation so that they can learn on the job. OJT is so important.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a whole leadership academy that we bring folks along, trying to help them see behind the curtain, which makes a lot of sense on doing that. Finally, maybe, how do you help when you're trying to bring these people along? How do you help without necessarily hurting? In other words, you don't really want to do for me. You want to help bring them along. And it seems to me that when you're lending those keys, sometimes it can be painful. But how do you do that? How do you bring them along there?
Yeah, and it can be painful because oftentimes inexperience leads to mistakes, right? We've made them when we were younger, and what we had were adults, older, more experienced leaders around us that corrected our mistakes, picked us up, and said, "All right, yeah, that was not a good idea." But here's how we're going to fix it, and let's keep moving forward. It's those relationships between, again, those generations, right?
And there's trust in there.
Yeah, trust that is built in the relationship, and ultimately, we talk about love, right? Love is something that we talk about from our faith perspective, but also relational, from with one another. And the way that I would describe or define love is truly desiring the very best for the other person.
Exactly.
And so I know it's maybe weird to talk about loving our clients. But I think as a realtor, you're talking about really desiring the very best for them.
Right.
And I think when we get into that kind of relationship, then that's where success happens, because that's the measure of serving one another and doing that well.
No, for sure. And that makes perfect sense, because we talked about our why, which was to make our communities better. We just exist for our communities and our profession to be better. And if we do that, if we lead with that, I think that is the measure of success, isn't it?
I believe so. I believe so.
Yeah. Can we say that the ultimate, can we say that service is maybe the verb of love? In other words, it's the demonstration of that love?
Yeah, absolutely. If I desire the very best for you, then I'm going to do whatever it takes so that you can, quote unquote, succeed. Whatever success looks like in that situation, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, I mean, when I desire the very best for Lee, I'm going to do everything in my power for you to experience life to the fullest.
Which takes intergenerational.
That's right.
Get rid of the silos and seek the betterment of everyone.
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Andy, for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot. If you'd like to know more, please follow us on our website, follow all of our social media channels, and subscribe to our podcast at Inside the Canopy Files.